In January of 2020, just before the lockdown, I went to visit a client that I'd only spoken to for a few months over the phone, over our free helpline. So I'd never met her face to face. And we decided that we were going to meet up and I was going to take a full testimony in terms of how her Prevent referral had impacted her. So if you've seen our video that we shared today, it's of a mother whose home was being banged on, the door was being banged on by Prevent officers for almost an hour. And the Prevent officer actually threatens to send in armed officers to force entry if she doesn't open the door to them. Now, this whole ordeal occurred for almost an hour. And as that mother was recording, and the recording that you can hear, although the video has been edited and although the recording has been sliced right down to about a minute worth of recording, that recording was an hour long, and it's a real audio of what is happening and what is playing out behind on the other side of her front door of her home. And if you listen carefully, you can hear there's a little baby crying, and that baby isn't somewhere in the background. That baby is literally in the mum's arm. Right? Few months old baby in her arms. She's got another phone in her hand that she's using to record this entire incident as it plays out. And then she's got a phone as well where she's speaking to the lawyer, which you can't hear on that particular recording because we've edited it out, but she's actually speaking to the lawyer and she's asking them for advice. We'd spoken to her a few days before she received this visit. And so we'd put her already in touch with one of the family lawyers. And she was speaking to her on the phone and ensuring that, you know, she was acting well within her rights by not opening the door and having certain expectations of the Prevent officer and of the social workers when they had approached her. So she didn't end up opening the door, but it was a huge ordeal. She had a month-old baby in her hand. She had one phone trying to record what was going on, a phone, you know, trying to understand what her rights were. She's got Prevent officers and social worker on the other side of her door threatening to send armed police to knock that door down. And she's got a 4-year-old by her feet, a 4-year-old child. And the concern that the Prevent officers had was that the 4-year-old may be at risk of radicalisation. Yeah, a 4-year-old, a child barely out of nappies, right, would be at risk of radicalisation. And the Prevent officers weren't concerned that that 4-year-old was at risk of radicalisation from her parents or anyone within that home. So there was no real sense of urgency, okay? Not to mention the fact that, by the way, the local authority have admitted that there was absolutely no need to have carried out that assessment. Had they done their job properly in the first place, they would have realised that that child never needed to be visited in the first place, right? So they didn't do their job. All of this is happening. And the reason why I rewind back to January 2020 and tell you that I went to visit this client specifically is because living in central London and living in a very busy part of central London, it's always very, very noisy. So everywhere I walk, when I walk to the shops, I walk home, it's really, really noisy outside. So when I came to visit this sister, and I walked up her street, very residential, quiet street, and up this beautiful drive to a beautiful home, and what struck me was how silent that whole street was. The entire street, like you couldn't even hear birds chirping, kind of quiet. And I genuinely, as I stood there outside her front door, I got goosebumps because I was thinking of the audio that I'd heard and of that entire scene and just looking at how much of a clear view that all of her neighbours would have had of that front door. Okay, her neighbours are not going to know that she put in a complaint. Her neighbours are not going to know that the local authority admitted they made a mistake, that the Prevent officers were working well outside of their remit in that particular instance, in complete overreach and making threats that they shouldn't have been making in the first place. They are not going to know that. All they know is that there's a Muslim family that lives over there, and they've got Prevent officers and social workers banging at their door, threatening to bust the door down, essentially. That's all her neighbours know. And it really stood in my mind, that particular visit to that client's house, and just how silent that street was and what that must have meant for her experience and for their experience and for the rest of her neighbourhood's experience. Obviously, outside of that, this particular client sticks in my mind because it was a hugely traumatic experience for her. During that referral, they'd shared the information of her children with her medical professionals. And it stuck with her so much so that years later, when this client had a baby who was in hospital, she was second guessing what the medical professionals were telling her when her baby was in A&E, because she couldn't quite trust that those medical professionals were acting in their role as medical professionals, or if they were acting in their role and potentially knew of the prevent referral that had occurred. She wasn't sure. She doesn't know where that information has been shared. So it's a real kind of tangible fear that she had, because she'd already been through it. She'd already seen her child's data be shared across various professional bodies, including her own medical professionals. So it felt very real to her again, and brought all those memories flooding back again when years later she was in hospital with her child, and again had to speak to medical professionals, and she was just thinking, oh my God, are they telling me what's in the best interest of my child, or are they telling me something that, you know, essentially is because they're looking at me with a lens of suspicion? So it really is something that stays with you. You know, this whole idea of like, oh no, thousands of people are referred and we vet it and nothing comes of it and no further action, and rather be safe than sorry, that's all nonsense. It really sticks with the person that has been referred. And in this particular case, if you haven't seen the video, I strongly suggest you go to the Twitter or Instagram or Facebook or even YouTube, and you can watch the video and you can hear the baby crying in the background. You can hear what the prevent officer is saying to her. And you can come to your own conclusions about that particular experience. We're really grateful that she came to us with this particular incident, and we were able to document it and we were able to share it and raise awareness. And we are extremely happy that we were there to support her, and we still are supporting her to this day. And we would be very grateful if you could share that video, if you could raise awareness about what's happening with regards to Prevent, raise awareness about Prevent Watch so people who are impacted can come and speak to us about what's happened, get free information and free support. And also, if you could share and donate, we'd be extremely grateful. We're entirely dependent on community donations, and we ask that you share and donate. And during this blessed month, please make lots of dua for us and for all the individuals impacted. Jazakallah khair.